Hello, this is international football commentator Derek Ray of the EAFC video game and the Bundesliga. You're listening to the SFF Podcast World Cup Special, the home of World Cup 26 banter.
World Cup 2026 is edging ever closer. 55 days to go until the opening game and 57 days until Scotland mark their return to the global stage when they face Haiti in Boston. I'm John and welcome to the latest World Cup edition of SFF Podcast, where we're going to delve into memory lane by reflecting on the era where qualifying for World Cups was the done thing for the men's national team. Joining me is regular to SFF and a man barely out of nappies when we last qualified for finals, Dave Smith. How are you, big man?
I wasn't even born, but I am all good.
In 98? You were born.
Oh, 3 years old, pardon me, yeah. I was 3 years old, it was 1998. It's just when Maurice Malpas played, I wasn't born, pardon me.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, you've just given the game away here. You don't know what it was like when Scotland qualified for five finals in a row, but I swear it happened. And our special guest tonight is a man who played in two of those finals in 86 and 1990, and also played at Euro 92. It's 55 cap defender and inductee in the Scottish Football Hall of Fame, Maurice Malpas. Welcome to the podcast, Maurice. How are you keeping?
Good evening, gents. Yeah, keeping well. Yeah, looking forward to what rubbish we can talk tonight, what memories we can bring back, and explain to people that we did qualify for a World Cup often.
Yeah, it was certainly halcyon days back then. Even before we go into your playing career, what was your kind of earlier memories following the national team before you began playing?
As a kid, it was always the cup final was shown one Saturday, and then Scotland-England was shown the next Saturday. Sit in front of the TV, your dads, a few dads in the house, having a few tinnies, and the kids sitting on the floor watching the football, engrossed in the football. Your guys, you never really seen apart from the Scotland-England games or sometimes the cup finals. But it was a big thing. I stayed in the village, and it was a massive thing to watch the Scotland games. They were all really on the TV once a year, maybe twice a year. But it was a massive thing for us to watch. And then as soon as the game finished, you were outside battering the ball a bit against the wall, kidding on you were whoever was the best player that day.
I can imagine the kind of players that you tried to emulate in those days, but in your first full senior cap for Scotland, you came up against one of these guys you might have wanted to be. That was Michel Platini, playing against France in Marseille, which was a warm-up game for their Euro 84. He did lose 2-0 that night, but what was your memories of that occasion and coming up against arguably the best player in the world at that time?
It all came about. Dundee United played against Roma in the semi-final of the European Cup, the Champions League, and we got beat across in Rome. We're 2-0 up and got beat across in Rome 3-0. And after the game, Jock Stein, who had been invited by Dundee United as a guest for the game, he came up to me in the airport and he says, "I know you're disappointed, but I'm going to cheer you up. I'm going to cap you at the end of the season," which was fantastic for me. I played under 21 football, but you get to the stage, you just keep on playing, and then to get picked, believe it or not, I was getting married on the Saturday. The game was the Friday evening in Marseille. So a bit of a panic in case we never got back in time. But the game itself, I remember we never got too many touches. I was amazed at how Platini could run a game, how he could hit the ball 60 yards pass. And the Adidas sign would turn up the right way. There was Tigana play, Fernandez play. They were just... And I remember after the game Jock Stein came and sat beside me and congratulated me for getting capped. And I says to him, "I don't think I'm good enough for this." Because I hardly got a kick of the ball. I mean, when Scotland never got a kick of the ball. 2-0 was a great result for us. And Big Jock said to me, he says, "Look, son, you'll probably never play against a better team in your career I would imagine that this lot are going to go and win the European Championships, which they did in 1984. And I never really played against a better team in my 55 caps than that night. It was a friendly game. They were probably out for a stroll. We just chased shadows. And thankfully, we never got a chasing like that too often after that.
Well, that must have been a good pre-wedding present, getting the first cap for Scotland.
Yeah, we got a wee bit of stag do coming back on the flight, 1 or 2 beers. My father picked me up at the airport, middle of the night, home, couple of hours sleep, and then bang, we're at it at the wedding again. And of course, I know it was a big thing to get married, but everybody wanted to know how you played and what it felt like. So it was a great weekend. Let's put it that way.
I can imagine. I can imagine what was down that night, come back from Marseille. But you had to wait just under a year for your next cap, and it was a pretty good second cap to get a Rouse Cup win over England at Hampden, the last Scotland side to beat England at Hampden. And your former teammate Richard Gough scored the winner with that incredible towering header.
Well, that was another. The week of the game, Jock Stein took me aside and said, "You're going to play against Trevor Francis on Saturday." Trevor was his first £1 million player, absolutely on fire. And he says, Jock Stein said to me, and he doesn't like getting kicked. You have to be aggressive. I said, okay, fine. But every day he was on at me, constantly on at me. Remember, he's got a big reputation, he's got a big transfer tag on him. He doesn't like the physical side. Okay. Honestly, I was up to fever pitch. I was like a elastic band, wound and wound and wound. The centre was taken, it was passed out to Trevor. He took a bad touch, and my touch was him, and absolutely cemented him. And I remember the rest of the game, he wandered back and forward from our side of the park to the other side of the park and came back and that. And then he disappeared away from me. And I thought, start the second half, I thought I'd want to watch. But Chrissy Waddle came on. And Chrissy, he was playing 1-2s off my shins and I didn't know if it was New York or New Year for about 10 minutes. So it was a baptism with fire. First Scotland-England game, Rouse Cup. All my family sitting in the stand watching it. And for a wee while, I wasn't very sure where I was. And I'll never forget that game. Obviously, Big Duffy scored a goal. And I don't think we'd beat England for a few years prior to that. But it was a great occasion, fantastic occasion.
Absolutely. The World Cup qualifier was 1985 against Wales. You were playing in left midfield with Steve Nicol behind you. How did you feel playing in that position, Maurice?
Well, I was fine. Initially, I went to Dundee United as a midfield player.
Okay.
And then ended up playing right back for a little while in the reserves. Suddenly I'd done okay. And got into the first team and played right back, and then moved to left back, moved to midfield. I was one of Jim McLean's players that I could probably play 3 or 4 different positions in the space of 10 minutes, never mind a game. But I was comfortable with playing any place. Was never comfortable in the opposition's box because I was hopeless at scoring goals. But I enjoyed having the freedom to get a chance to play in different positions. And when you were playing for your national team, you would play any place. It doesn't matter where you got asked to play, you would say yes. I would never refuse to play in any position. I'd maybe get embarrassed if I played as a striker because I'm hopeless in front of the goals. But any other place, you would just go on with the head down, control it, pass it, get on the move, see if you can get it again.
Of course, that night was a night of mixed emotions, getting the draw and it guaranteed the playoff. And then the unfortunate news, the shock news that Jock Stein had passed away sadly. Sum up how quickly the mood had shifted when you learned the news about Mr. Stein's passing.
Yeah, it's amazing. We went for euphoria to the the depths of emotions. Qualifying to go and play in the playoffs for the World Cup, that was my first one. And obviously, your manager, your guy that you looked up to, somebody who was a giant in the game in Scotland, a giant in the game in the world, had passed away during the game. It was difficult to take in. It was difficult to really comprehend really what happened and really what to do. It was a difficult journey back up the road. It was a difficult few days after that.
Yeah. Alex Ferguson then comes in and guides us past Australia in the playoffs. What are your recollections of that, Maurice? And also, how inconvenient was the long haul trip mid-season?
Well, the boys went away, the Scotland team went away on the Wednesday prior to the game, the following Wednesday. Dundee United were playing in Europe on the Wednesday. So we flew back. Myself, Richard Goff and Watty Smith flew on the Thursday, arrived in Melbourne on the Saturday morning, and all the lads were at the tennis. So we spent our first few years in Australia watching the Australian Tennis Open. And then it was back down to business. Sunday training, Monday training, Tuesday training, Wednesday was a match. A bit of a nothing match really, because we got our nose on. We were two up at Hampden. So as long as we never done anything stupid, we're in the driving seat. So that's what happened. Big plus for guys like myself. First time I'd been in the squad that was going to go to a World Cup. So it was a great occasion. Eamon's Bannon's brothers stayed there, so they came and took us out, or took me out for a few beers after the game and showed me a bit of Melbourne. And then it was back the next morning. The Scottish lads never played on the Saturday. The English lads had to come back and play on the Saturday. So they were flying really Wednesday night, British time. They were arriving back Thursday night, and they were having to get their boots back on the Saturday morning. I bet you they were knackered. That was I wouldn't have enjoyed that one. It was a great trip, but just because we won the game. If we'd been beaten and never qualified for a World Cup, it would have been the longest flight, the most enjoyable flight you've ever been on, probably.
Yeah. Graham Souness became the player manager of Rangers prior to the World Cup. I know I think there was a story about Charlie Nicholas I read, but did he ever try and convince you to sign for Rangers during the few weeks you were at the tournament with him?
No. I was in one of his. They split the squad up.
Okay.
When we went to Santa Fe, we went altitude training to Santa Fe, but never really. We never trained long enough for it to really have any effect. But we got split into squads, and I was in Graham's squad. But he never ever said anything. I would imagine if they were thinking about anything at that time, what he would have came and gave me the nod. But no, there was nothing. It was later on things happened in terms of Rangers. But it was quite strange that Graham was going away to be the Rangers manager, and he literally grilled you, about certain things that Dundee United did and certain things that happened in the league. He was definitely doing his homework when he was away with the Scotland boys.
Yeah. What was the camaraderie like in the squad in '86, Maurice?
Good. Yeah, we're all used to playing together. There wasn't any prima donnas. A lot of the guys had played together under 21s. A lot of the guys have been brought up together. We went away. To Mexico. It wasn't the best place to go to, but it was a case that you all had to muck in and help each other pass the time of day, because we stayed away in the sticks when we were in Mexico because we were last to qualify. So it was, your room was tiny, your bed was literally cut out the side of a mountain cave. Your TV screen was the size of a portable TV, and there was more snow on it than there was anything else. So you couldn't watch a game of football because you weren't very sure where the ball was. There wasn't any iPads, games. It was a case, you got up in the morning, you were praying to go to training early, you trained, you came back, you rushed to get a shower before there wasn't any hot water, and then you rushed for a coffee, lunch, sat and watched videos. That's movies. There wasn't any videos of opposition or anything like that. It was hard to get through it. The boredom was unbelievable, and there was only one telephone in and out the hotel, so there was a queue every night, and if somebody got through before you, very rarely did you get through. So I found that quite difficult. It was you're away on your own, although there was 5 Dundee United players there, which helped. But it was, everybody thinks it's luxurious hotels and everything's laid on for you. Well, Mexico was never like that.
Yeah, pretty much like a travel lodge, was it?
It wasn't as good as that.
Just before George comes back in, what were the training hotel facilities like in Mexico?
Well, the training facilities were, at that time, you'd probably say half decent. It was nice to train with the sun on your back, and it was one of the things, because the hotel was so boring, you wanted to stay out in the training ground. You wanted to do extra. You didn't want to go back to the hotel. The food was good, but that was mainly because the SFA had their own chefs and everything. But the hotel itself was pretty basic, quite boring, or very boring. The biggest thing I learned when I was away with the first World Cup was I became a bit of a movie buff watching so many movies. Brian Henry was the guy from Aberdeen who was into the movies, and he brought hundreds of Betamax and VHS tapes that nobody will understand what that is. But we sat and watched them hour after hour after hour, coffee after coffee after coffee, and the occasional game of table tennis. That was it.
Dave's going to be Googling what Betamax is at the end of this podcast.
Probably is, John, you're right.
I barely remember them, but Dave certainly get no chance. But you played the first 2 matches against Denmark and West Germany. They both ended in narrow defeats. Although you were up against top class sides at the time, and that Denmark team was particularly good as well. How frustrating was it to come away from those games with nothing?
Oh, very. We thought we'd do better than we did against Denmark. Obviously, we never expect to get beat against Denmark. And then the next game, playing against West Germany, we foolishly went in front and woke them up. And then the last game was a bit... The last game we should never speak about, because it doesn't deserve to be spoken about in terms of football. There wasn't any football played. It was just... it was a character test. And I thought we would have done okay at that, but they were wound up, and they made it difficult in terms of there wasn't any real flow to the game. It was stop start. I watched that game. Obviously, it was a particularly boring game to watch. Although you're desperate for it, you're thinking you're going to nick a goal. But that goal never appeared, and that was us back home early again.
Yeah, you mentioned that you watched that game. You were left out the starting lineup. What was the reason that Ferguson gave, and how frustrated was it watching all that unfold?
Well, it took me. I went to after the West Germany game, because we'd played it. I think it was midday or 1 o'clock we played. It was 100 odd degrees, 100% humidity for two or 3 days, or 2 days after the game. I never felt well. I was absolutely drained from the game. But Alec Ferguson just pulled me aside and he says, "Look, I'm going to give Arthur a game." Arthur Alberson was in the squad. He says, "I'm going to give Arthur a game. You've done well." He says, "But I feel as though I've got to give Arthur a game. So you gave Arthur a game, which that he picked the team, and didn't he? You know, there was nothing you could really say. And you know, watching the game, you're desperate for a team to do well because you thought you'd get a game the next game. You're desperate for them to win, but as I said, that never happened. The game was a shocking game to watch. The guys who played in it never really enjoyed playing it. Gordon Strachan never enjoyed it. That's a certainty. He was up in the sky more than he was on the ground. But that's something that I learned quite quickly, that South Americans can be just as brutal as we can be. You know, we had a reputation of being, I wouldn't say, we've had a reputation of being dirty and hard and things like that. But there's one or two teams that could put us to shame when it comes to that department.
Yeah, I've got a mate who detests Uruguay that much that he wanted England to beat them in 2014. That's how much he recalls Uruguay from that game. And I think Ernie Walker had a few choice words. I think he called them the scum of world football and stuff like that. But Gordon Strachan explained to me once that he gets it given some of the backgrounds and stuff, but it would have been a dirty, dirty game.
Yeah, it's... As I say, we shouldn't really talk about it because it doesn't deserve to be discussed when we're talking about football. They never try to play football. They never try to do anything bar kickers. But a lot of people say it worked because they stopped us to get into the next stage.
Yeah, and I think, were one of those four third place sides that made it through, which is annoying as well. But despite that disappointment of going home early, etc., how proud were you to play in your first World Cup?
Oh, it's hard to describe it, John. You know, I was, as I say, a young kid, watched Scotland-England games maybe once a year, and then started playing. Got to play, I was lucky enough to play under 21 international games. Obviously, I played the first team with Dundee United, European, been at a few finals with Dundee United as well. We'd won the league at Dundee United. And then utopia has been capped by your country and then going and playing the World Cup finals. And that's top of the mountain for me as a kid, top of the mountain for me as a player. Some you'll never forget, some that I'm very proud of. You know, there's a lot of players that have played international football who never got to a World Cup. So that's something I'm very proud of. We have a laugh and joke when we meet up with some of the other players about how pathetic the facilities were, but I would have slept on the edge of a razor blade if it meant I was going to get a game for Scotland in the World Cup and a chance to qualify to go on.
Yeah, well, you fulfilled a dream there. So after Ferguson left, Andy Roxburgh was appointed manager, much to media surprise and, dare say, ridicule. But what was your initial thoughts when he got the job? Because I understand you worked with him at some point during the youth teams at one point.
Yeah, I played under 17, under 18 youth football, and Andy was the manager. We used to go once. Was it once every year or once every 2 years? We used to go to France and play in a tournament there. The under 17s, he took us. I got in fine. I knew Andy a bit from the coaching course as well. The kids at Dundee United were taken to the coaching course, the SFF coaching courses, to be guinea pigs, to the runners for the coaches. So I knew of Andy. I could say hello to him. I didn't really know him as a kid. You never really know anybody that's senior. And then when we got the job, I've got to admit it was a surprise. And a lot of guys never liked how he went about his business. He was meticulous in his organisation, and everything had to be clockwork. And if anybody stepped off that clock, he got upset, and some of the things he would say was a bit petty. But I thought he took us to another level in terms of how the players were treated. After games, it used to be make your way home, get yourself up the road, fly back, maybe arrive 3 or 4 in the morning. You would get yourself on, you're going to a hotel room for 2 hours or 3 hours sleep. You couldn't get to sleep. And you'd fight for a train back up to Dundee or whatever. Andy made it, we came back, and there was virtually a taxi on the runway. Took you home, took you up to your house. He organised things like that, travelling down to an international game. There was cars picked you up and took you. There was cars brought you home, and he just made you feel important. It was something different. And his thought was about players' well-being. He was the first one that really got into that kind of stuff. The English lads, if we played in a midweek game at Hampden, they were taxis straight down the road. They slept in the back of the taxi and turned up for training, and then had a day off on the Thursday, probably turned up for training fresh as daisies on a Friday. So, Andy was, as you say, the press and a lot of the senior people in Scottish football were quite shocked when Andy got it, but I never had any problems with Andy at all. I got on fine with him, as I say. I knew him a wee bit for the coaching course, and I knew him because of the underage football.
Yeah, he would go and do a decent job for Scotland, and I know Hugh McDowell, when we spoke to him the same year 92 book, said that Andy was ahead of his time. So when you described that, it just brought that back. So we didn't qualify for 82, but he does guide us to Italia 90, finishing second ahead of a France side which had Papan and Cantona in the team, and we beat them obviously that night at Hampden. Just sum up that qualification campaign, including that memorable night against the French.
Well, it was one of the ones that everybody expected us to qualify. It was strange at the time. Nobody expected us to qualify for a European Championships. We never done it. We put everything into the World Cups, and I think we went to sleep for the next couple of years. So the pressure was on again to get to the final, because you didn't want to be the team that never actually made the finals. And I remember the France game at Hampden. It was a poor night in terms of the weather, and we got stuck right into them. We got wired right into them and beat them 2-0. I think, was it 2-0?
Yeah, Mo Johnson double.
I think Yugoslavia run away with the group, didn't they? And I remember going away to Paris to play the French, and there was a few rumours about this guy called Cantona. Some people were saying he's a world beater. Some people were saying he was a panel beater. And I remember that night he gave Alec McLeish an absolute nosebleed. He was definitely a star in the making. When I was watching him, standing next to him, I was chasing his backside. He was a player. He stood out a mile that night. He was unbelievable. But strange at times. We got absolutely thumped by France in '84, and then we're playing them 5 years later, '89, and they were never anything like the team they were at '84. The game at Hampden, everybody was expecting us to win, and we won. I don't think anybody expected us to get beat 3-0 in France, in Paris. Yeah, but it was that man Cantona who conducted the choir there, and he put it. He was just different. Let's put it that way. He was different. And that's the other games. Cyprus, was it?
Yeah, that's where we got the 95th minute winner with Richard Gough.
Yeah, that's right. I remember that one. A big Goughy scored. And we had a horrendous time after the game. We were stuck in the dressing room for about 2 hours because I think the fans were trying to get in to get the referee, because the referee played too much injury time. And the fans were desperate to lynch the referee. So we sat in the dressing rooms for a good bit longer than we normally would. But I do remember that one that Goughy scored. I think the ball hit the back of the net and the referee blew for time up. The other games, was it Norway? Was Norway one of the other ones?
Yeah, we won 2-1 away in Oslo, and then we drew 1 each at Hampden, where McCoy scored with a lob that qualified us that night.
Well, I couldn't remember Coisty scoring, but that was just one of the fantastic nights at Hampden. You get very few bad nights at Hampden. You know, Scotland at that time had a decent record. You know, never got beat that often at Hampden. And the old stands, the old stadium was fantastic. The atmosphere it generated was unbelievable. Right on top of you, literally on top of you. It was a great atmosphere. It was a great place to play.
Absolutely. Andy and Craig Brown both ensure that you got a good hotel after issues with previous accommodation. Maurice, how did the facilities compare to 86?
Oh, night and day. We stayed in a place called Rapallo, which was up in the hills, up in the mountains. The hotel was absolutely stunning. The facilities we had for training was out of this world. The gymnasium at the hotel was out of this world. Everything was top notch. You know, Mexico was poor, and Italy was phenomenal. You know, everything was far better. The organisation was far better in Italy, but everything, you know, our hotel, our facilities, the area we stayed in, it was quite posh, and we could go for a walk, we could go for a wander, and there was never any worry about, you know, having to take a security guard with you or anything like that. Whereas in Mexico, you wouldn't go any place outside the hotel. But Italy was fantastic. Just the football let us down a bit.
Yeah. What were the expectations this time, and what was the mood going into the tournament on the back of mixed friendly results?
I think everybody was confident. You know, with a settled squad, we all got on well together. We'd played a fair number of games together. You had one or two old heads. Well, Graham Souness wasn't there. He went by the wayside. But we still had a few seasoned pros. There was Big Roy Aitken. Myself, I was classed as a senior pro by that time. Big Guffey was classed as a senior pro by that time. We were quite confident. Unfortunately, the first game was a bit of a culture shock, a bit of kick in the between the legs, and it did knock us a wee bit. You know, nobody knew how Costa Rica would play. Nobody knew what their main assets were. There wasn't any videos. There was none of this. You know, there was no scouting that could actually cover that. So it was one or two clips that were shown, and go and play and see you go on. And unfortunately, we got beat. And everybody had the perception that Costa Rica were the local pub team. If I'm right, I think that was the first time they'd qualified for a World Cup. Would that be right? So everybody thought pub team, Scotland beat them. Well, they weren't a pub team. Scotland never beat them. And although we went on and done well against Sweden, you know, for 80 minutes against Brazil, we were fine, and then lost a goal. Game done and dusted. I think we had to wait for another game to finish to find out whether we qualified or didn't qualify. Everybody knows what happened, and off we came back home again early. Disappointed again.
Yeah. You started all three matches. It was another narrow exit as we were one of the two worst third-place teams. The Costa Rica result is a standout reason. When you were self-critical of their goal, explain why, Maurice.
Well, we Dundee United, as a full-back at Dundee United, nothing went inside you, everything went down the side. So you showed everybody this, you know, the touchline. But Andy Roxburgh had decided that we were going to show everybody in the way and channel it onto Roy Aitken in the middle of the park, and Big Roy will sort it out. So I showed the wide player, I showed him in the park. and Big Roy wasn't there, and the boy binged it in the bottom corner for about 25, 30 yards. 1-0 down, game beaten. We lost the game. The next lunchtime, I think I'd been at a bit of training, came back, and there was a phone call from me. Jim McLean was on the phone, and I'll just shorten the verse, and he says, "What do you think you're up to?" Showing him inside. We didn't do that. I said, but that's what they were wanting here. And I think he went and had a pop at Andy Roxburgh after that. But Jim McLean slaughtered me. He actually ripped me to threads because we never showed anybody inside. If I'd done that at Dundee United, I probably never played for a few weeks.
Yeah.
So that shows you, that's just because Dundee United played one way and defended one way, the other teams done it differently, And that was one of the times that I done it differently and it didn't come off. After that, I think I just kept on doing what I'd done at Dundee United and showing them down the line, no material what the manager told me. You only get stung once with something like that. But that was Jim McLean. He was straight into me, wondering what was happening. I never lost my marble. I think that was one of the things that you lost your effing marbles. So that was a second kick in the teeth after a result, and then my manager phoned me up and gave me absolute dog's abuse. I was desperate to get in the next game and get a victory, try and get a victory to get the previous games out of my mind and what happened with my manager.
Yeah. You're part of the last Scotland side to win a World Cup match thanks to the win over Sweden. Describe the emotions of that night.
Well, I think the hullabaloo and the joy after the Sweden game was a bit OTT, but that was mainly because the disappointment that we had against Costa Rica was a disappointing result, and then a few days after that, that we got battered by the press. Thankfully, never got battered by the supporters, and then we went into the Sweden game knowing we had to win, but it was us against the world sort of style, backs to the wall. Big Roy got up and said a bit of one or two words that stirred the dressing room up, and off we went, and obviously won the game. Although I doubt anybody would have picked Stuart McCall to be the goal scorer. It was a fantastic performance. Although the last 15-20 minutes, it was a bit of a nerve-wracking experience. We were under the cosh a little bit. I don't know if we were panicking about trying to get to the final whistle, or panicking about the way the games had been going. But in the end, it worked out great. Got a victory. Into the dressing room, and it was OTT. You thought we'd win the World Cup. And then back to the hotel, a few beers. Maybe that was a bit OTT, and then it was head down worrying about the Brazil game.
Yeah, and in that Brazil game, at least so we're going to get the result that would have taken us through, because a draw would have seen us through. But then it's a combination. It's a night of two goalkeepers. You had, but Jim Leighton unfortunately couldn't hold the Alamau shot, and a Miller score from it. And then Taffrell made one of the best saves I've ever seen from Mo Johnston. Do you recall what would have been said to Jim at that point, who no doubt would have felt personal disappointment at the goal that we lost that ultimately put us out?
Yeah, there was nothing really said to Jim after the game. But if you know Jim Leighton, he's his biggest critic. And he battered himself because he was very, very proud of the fact that he didn't give cheap goals away. And that was one of the ones, you could say it was a very good save, but it just went out the wrong side. Maybe Marcel or who else played at the back, Gary Gillespie or that, we should have been falling in quicker. The striker should never go into the end yet. We could have that argument, but As it was, I think it was the last 10 minutes of the game. We lost the goal. Thought we'd got a draw at the end of the game. Keeper saved something he should never have saved. And I think we had to wait a little while after the game for another game to finish to find out if we had qualified. And lo and behold, we're back home early again, not qualifying. So that was a disappointment, big disappointment.
Yeah, I think we needed at least one of two results to go our way. But Uruguay scored a late winner against South Korea, and Republic of Ireland and Netherlands drew one each, and we needed a win for one of the teams in that game. Lo and behold, it was a draw. Yeah. So I think it was a combination of that put us out. Typical Scottish story, unfortunately. Prior to we've discussed United before, so I won't go into that too much. But one thing I will ask is, you won your 50th cap against Norway. How special was that?
Well, to get into the Hall of Fame was something that I could never really dream about, or never dream about. As I say, a kid watching the game, sitting in front of the TV to get into a couple of World Cups, get into European Championships, and get into the Holy Grail of getting in the Hall of Fame, after 50 caps, it was difficult to take in for me. I'm a wee boy for Fife. It was very difficult. Some obviously very, very proud of. Andy Roxbury told me prior to the guys meeting up that he would cap me. I'd get my 50th cap before we went to Sweden and get that out of the way so they didn't have to play me just to give me my 50th cap if I was having a disaster. So I played, and one of the things Andy did was, 50 caps, you were captain of the team that day, although I'd captained Scotland before against Bulgaria. But to be captain, get my 50th cap was special, obviously. And the congratulations I got from the players after the game was special. People don't think that international players are tight-knit bunch, but we were a tight-knit bunch. And some of the things that the guys done, some of the things I can't tell you what they've done, but it was special. I'll never forget it. And then obviously went away to Sweden.
Yeah, and it was a memorable couple of weeks in Sweden. That you were part of the very first Scotland side to play in the European Championship. We couldn't have been the harder group. The world champions, European champions, and the Euro 8 runners-up all in the same group. So, just summarise. We've discussed it before for the United 2 book, but just summarise briefly the experience of those 2 weeks and what it meant being part of that tight-knit squad, as you said, that performed very well and a wee bit unlucky not to even get through.
Oh, it was special because we were the first team to qualify for a European Championship. There's only 8 teams, so you're one of the best 8 teams in Europe. Fantastic saying that. My biggest memory in Sweden was, and this was Andy Roxbury again, he wanted to stop it. There was fan zones, fans, campsites and that, and Andy thought it would be a good idea if we stopped and sort of thanked the supporters for coming across to Sweden. And I think we ended up playing about a 40-a-side match. There was guys involved in about 10 different games. There was, you're away to play against Holland or something the next day, and there was guys in the middle of 5 football pitches at the one time, guys going different places. You're saying, this isn't right, this is just off the scale here. But that was Andy. Andy wanted the players to thank the fans, and the fans were brilliant. The Scottish fans every place have been brilliant. In my experiences, even in Mexico, you wouldn't think there'd be too many. By God, there was many. And then you get close to home, Italy and Sweden. They were always there. They were always cheering you, and that's it. That's the biggest thing for me. The Scottish fans make up for a lot of things that aren't right about Scottish football, but in Sweden, they were absolutely unbelievable. And then, you know, lost the first 2 games and then went away and won the last game, you know, a canter 3-0 against the CIS. And you'd have thought Scotland had won the World Cup or the European Championship. The fans were going absolutely mental. Andy Roxburgh had us sitting at the dressing room to thank them about 10 times because they wouldn't leave the stadium. So that shows you how much they thought of the team. But for somebody to say that I would be going away to play an international game the next day, and I'm honestly in a public park with umpteen games on, you would have said, no, you've been on the sauce, son.
Yeah, that was that was an iconic memory, that campsite. Chris from our podcast asked a couple of questions all linked into Euro 92. So he asked about the CIS game because you were obviously left out for Tom Boyd for that game. But he's disappointed to be dropped for that game. And I've also to ask, was the first goal an own goal in that game too? Because obviously it's credited to Paul McStay, but it did hit the post and come off, carrying the head.
Well, I think I got credit for the own goal because it hit my shin guard. The cross hit my shin guard.
That was the Germany game, yeah. Effenberg.
Beat Andy Goro. So we're going through a spell of OGs, weren't we? But I think the Holland game, we were in the game up to the last 10 minutes again. We lost a goal near a death. I played against Ruud Hull that day. And, he'd come back from injury, and that was another time. You know, Andy Roxburgh says that he'll struggle physically. Well, he was the fittest man I've seen him at Puff. He had been at the game for that long. But, you know, Van Bastenhalle had to kick the ball, and then he scores a goal to nothing. End of the game. Germany...
Was Bergkamp scored the winner of that game?
Germany were in the game, lost it. There was never a game there. Well, I know we only played 3 games, but there was never a game you would say you were well at the game. You know, all the games. Obviously, the CIS game at the end. It was if we never got a break prior to that game, we got breaks during that game, and we end up winning 3-0. You could put it that way. But the other games, you know, there was nothing to be upset about in terms of the performance. We just never had that little bit luck, or we never had that little bit extra to go and get something out of nothing and win a game. You know, it always seemed to be the Brazil game in Italy, well in the game, lost it, and then Sweden was very similar the 2 games. But that's how football is, isn't it?
Yeah, it definitely is. And Chris also asked, because this is going back to Andy Roxburgh's numbering system, it was based on number of caps. Do you feel left that you didn't get a stupid number in that squad, like Alan McCoy's got 5 and Stuart McKimmie get 9, for example? Did you get number 4?
I was never superstitious about numbers. As long as you got a number at that time at your club, it was a number 1 to 11. After that, you weren't too happy. But you know, Andy come up with some unbelievable things, and that was Andy didn't want to actually sit down and tell somebody you're number 2 or number 3 or number 4 just off the back. So there was always a reason why the numbers were as they were, and it was a number of caps. And I think everybody just said, "You're okay, fine. As long as I'm going, that's all that matters."
Yeah, exactly. The last of your 55 caps came in a World Cup qualifier at Ibrox against an Italian sides that had Baggio, and also featured the world's most explosive player at that time, Gianluigi Lentini. You obviously didn't realise that night was going to be your last game. Did Andy and Craig explain to you why you weren't being picked in future squads, and was it a big disappointment ending gradually after that?
No, I played that night. I played against Lentini, and I remember I collided with him. I'm going to be honest here. It was a collision, and I got absolutely ridiculed by the Italian press after the game, and one of the Italian councillors says that I should never have been on the pitch. But after that, missed a few games. I don't know if I was injured. That never picked me. And then I think Andy left quite, maybe 6-7 months after that or something. And Craig Brown took over. And Craig phoned me up and said that he was going to pick younger players, which was fine. I was 30 or 31 or something, 30. And he said he would pick younger players. They obviously want to play Tom Boyd. And that if there was ever a defender injured, I'd be the first man he would call. And for years after that, I kept on saying to Craig, "Did you lose my number?" Because he never called, and I never ever go back and I scored again. But that's, I was 30. I would be 30, yeah. I'd started coaching at Dundee United, so by missing this, not getting picked, I wouldn't say missing that. It was just I just got delved into my coaching and still played, obviously. Obviously, you'd like to play forever, but life isn't like that. You can never play forever. You've got a time scale. That was 8 years I'd played. Been to 2 World Cups and a European Championship, so I think that I got a fair return for what I put in. And it's up to, Craig wanted to play certain players, he wanted to pick younger players. Well, that's his prerogative. If he was manager, I never had a problem with that at all. At least they phoned me up and it wasn't done through the press, or it was done through the QT, or it was done through my manager or something. And Craig phoned me up. And then any time we'd seen each other after that, it's amazing how often you bump into each other when I can wind them up. We did.
Who were the best players, Maurice, you played against at both 86 and 90?
Who was the best?
Yep.
Oh.
We'll come back to that one.
Wow. One of the German players that they had... Rummenigge was still in the German squad. I thought he was a fantastic player, but he never played the day we played him. I think he came as a sub maybe. I never really got into that thing about who I was playing against as such. I try to get my head down and get on with the game and hope that person would get the better of me. But when you're at a World Cup, you tend to find that the bigger nations have a team of superstars, not just one or two like Scotland had. And it's a case that you just treat them as another opposition player and do your best against them.
If you could pick one standout player from Davy Neary, Richard Gough, Eamon Barron or Paul Sturrock to play in the current team, who would you pick?
Oh, Davy Neary is the best defender I've played with, period. So Gough is great defender, but Davy Neary a better defender. Had everything, quick, decent in the air, could pass it, could trap it. He was a European centre back long before European centre backs were spoken about. He could have played any place. So I will say Davy Neary.
Yeah, you'll definitely get a game instead of Grant Harlow. I can tell you that for nothing. There we go.
Even now.
Absolutely. Right, angriest manager you played under and why?
Angriest manager? Well, that's an easy one for me.
Is that Mr. McLean, is it?
That would be Jim McLean, yep. Well, I never seen Alec Ferguson go off on one. I've seen Watty go off on one, Watty Smith. I've seen him go off on one, but I would got to admit, Jim McLean, I think I've had every version of his Raven Looney outings. I've had every one of them. So I've got to say Jim McLean's the angriest man I've had a shouting from.
Yep. And how did it feel being inducted into the Hall of Fame in 2015?
Oh, well, there you go. It's another thing that you can never dream about. There was never anything like that. I never knew that existed for a few years prior to that written off. But it was something that it comes along because you've repeatedly turned up and performed. and it's great because it comes from other people. It isn't just you that says you're good or your manager. It's other people that selects that. So for that to happen to me was special, yeah. Because I say I'm a wee boy for Fife. Doesn't happen to wee Fifers.
Yeah. Just before John comes back in, just some questions from the podcast contributors. I'm going to reverberate Andrew's question a little bit. There's a question from Andrew. You've kind of touched on the 1986 World Cup and all the logistical issues you had and everything, but maybe explain to me the personalities that the four United teammates had in the Scotland squad that maybe helped yourself personally, Maurice.
Well, I'd been at United for 6 or 7 years by that time, so you knew each other inside out. You used to going away. I'd room with David Airy a few times with Dundee United, so rooming with him in hotels wasn't a problem. You knew you could get a laugh and a carry on with the players. You knew you could go and vent if you were having a hard time with another player or you never enjoyed it training. You could go and vent and they would keep it to themselves. It was just a natural thing, you know. Your teammates, your club teammates, are the ones that you sort of stick to, the ones that you bounce things off, the ones that can come and help you if you're struggling.
Yeah. Andrew asks again, you're meant to be the last part-time player capped by Scotland. Did it help you to complete your studies, even at a point where you're showing you would be able to play full-time football?
Well, my dad wouldn't let me go full-time. Aberdeen asked me to go full-time. Dundee United asked me to go full-time. Billy McNeil was manager at Aberdeen. He asked me. He had my parents up at Aberdeen. And then Big Billy decided to leave to go to Celtic. So Aberdeen never spoke to me. After that, I'd been going to Dundee United. Jim McLean asked the very same thing. Asked my family, my mum and dad to come up. We played Tayside Reserve League games on a Monday night. My mum and dad came up and Jim thought I was going to go for 2 years to college. I went for 5 years to college. He didn't particularly like it at times. Always planned to get a job outside football. Got capped by Scotland. My dad said to me, I don't think you can just think about going and getting a job now. I think you better give this a bit of a bash. And that's how it is. Ended up going full time. Just when I got married, 1984, I was still part time and essentially part time playing for Scotland that night in Marseille. I never got a full time contract till the following season. Jim started me on the 1st of July or whatever it was. On a full time contract, I was part time for 5 years with Dundee United, and well, everybody knows what's happened after that.
Yep. Question from Grant Campbell: Would you have wanted Jim McLean to have been the Scotland manager?
Well, he could have handled being Scotland manager in terms of the football. I'm not too sure he would have handled the press or some of the egos. He never liked that. So before I played with Scotland, Jim helped Jock Stein. When Jock Stein picked somebody as his assistant, you've got to stand up and take notice that that person must be decent in terms of football knowledge, decent in terms of the game and players and that. So you've got a bit of respect for Jim. But if you'd been Scotland manager, it wouldn't have bothered me. You'd probably be still shouting him anyway, so it didn't make any difference.
Yeah. Back to you, John.
Yeah, he probably would have just shouted at you every few weeks rather than every single day, but God rest him. A couple of questions from Charlie, part of the podcast. So he asks, do you have any regrets about your playing career?
None. As I say, I was lucky enough to play in Europe. Like 60 times I played in Europe for my club. I've been through it before, a couple of World Cups, European Championships. Could have moved maybe for more money, but money never really motivated me. It was about pride of performance and being amongst people that I enjoy working with.
Yeah, good job satisfaction. What was the pre-match meal of your choice?
Fish, bit of fish and some beans. Really exciting.
Nice. What was the favourite ground that you've played in?
My favourite ground, PSV Eindhoven.
Really?
Yeah.
What made that so special?
I think there was heaters on in the stadium. It was a cold night. There was heaters on in front of the stand. And the Van der Kerkhoff brothers played, and it was just a nice night. United won the game. The stadium was beautiful, and the surface, although we did play in a lot of good surfaces, but no, that was one of the ones that just stuck out. I don't know why.
Yeah, I understand that, especially if you win the game. Of course, Scotland are in the World Cup this year. What chance do you think the current squad have of making it to knockout stages?
Well, it'd be harder to come home early than it is to get into the knockout stages for me now, with the number of teams that are playing. And I think if Scotland play in a sensible manner in terms of trying to score goals, they will qualify for the next bit. I don't have any doubts about that. I think they'll be, if they can be their usual hard to beat, but get a bit more adventurous up the top, get more balls on the box, and I'm quite confident we'll qualify.
Let's hope that you're right. And finally, Maurice, just the last question I've prepared you for, and we thank you for your time. Name a Scotland 11 containing a mixture of players from the 86 and Italia 90 squads.
Well, Jim Leighton was the goalkeeper, just because I played with him most in terms of the Scottish thing. Andy Gorham was a really good goalkeeper, but I'll go Jim first. Guffey will be the right back, because he's a good defender. He can score goals and that. Willie Miller, one of the centre backs with David Neary. Willie Miller's probably the best penalty box defender I've played with. Probably one of the better ones, period, in Scotland. And as I've mentioned earlier, David Neary's the best defender I've played with overall. I would have Stevie Nicol as left back, mainly for his banter, but just a good player, can play in so many positions. V. Gordon Strachan, Graham Souness, Paul McStay, mainly because I played with Paul under 17s all the way through all the different teams, all the different age groups and that. Terrific player. The one I enjoyed playing behind was Coop, David Cooper. Fantastic guy to play behind, fantastic guy off the park. He looked after the so-called younger ones when we got in the squads. Coop was the one that would look after you, tell the older players to shut up, leave you alone. But I enjoyed playing with him. Just give him the ball, and when he was finished with it, he might have gave me it back. Strikers, I'll say Kenny Dalglish didn't go to Mexico or Italy, but he was there at the qualifying. I played with him a few games, so he's got to be there. And the Happy Harry, that another one that I played with through the age groups was Coisty, just a goal scorer, being in the butt sometimes, but he was one of the ones, if I was picking somebody to go through the goalkeeper, I would pick him. Somebody to score a goal at nothing, I would pick him. So that's probably the team, the general team. I'm sure there's other ones who are close to that as well, but they were the ones I would pick if I was manager.
Yeah, well, that's a pretty good team. That is a team that probably could get through this knockout stage this year. But but listen, thank you again for joining us on the podcast, Maurice, and enjoy the World Cup when it comes around. And thanks to Dave for assisting on this episode. Tune for more episodes of SFF Podcast in the coming weeks. And thanks for tuning to this episode. Bye for now.